to give an updated view of the world.
All right,
No, I think we're good. Yeah, thanks. Hey. Oh, yeah, yeah. And I've been following, you know, I was down in Florida with my relatives, so, but yeah.
I'm just right now. I want to.
Do you need a copy of
Hi, you're leaving too? Oh my God, you're throwing everybody in the wall.
so I mentioned it to Jackie.
We can split it up.
Mine and I very briefly,
But I don't think there's individual.
but I'll bring it up to you.
Great. Well, I might point to you to hold up the map just for visual. Yeah.
Oh, that
I think we've already did a couple extra ones on my
Jackie Ashworth in that email. You mind just reaching out to her and just talking to her? Well, let me know.
You're going to do that as an announcement?
What's any follow up on this? And then if you want to weigh in, or Jackie wants to weigh in, we'll go. Okay. All right.
And that's going to be, you want to do that as an announcement? Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to regret.
Okay, great. Okay. Okay. Cool. Thank you. I know. See how I've been using McDonald's.
To make this announcement.
Okay, great.
So just, you know, I'm not going to do it.
Good, because yeah, it was on my list, so that's great that he is here to do it.
Now I got it. You can hear it?
Carbon monoxide, like it just all it is just like new standards for carbon monoxide, like a warning, yeah, and it's all laid out. It's like a legal thing. All right, welcome everyone. We've already called this meeting to order, and this is the February 18th, President's Day, Village Council regular meeting. I think Kevin will hopefully be coming back. But let's go ahead and start our announcements, because I know that Kevin Magruder, where did I see Kevin? Oh, there he is. Kevin, did you want to talk about the Wheeling Gaunt event? Come on up.
Hey, Judy, can we put this up? Thanks.
I am part of a committee that Yellow Springs Art Council has led for the last probably about year and a half to commission a sculpture of Wheeling Gaunt. And council has talked about this. The sculpture will be near the railroad station. And I'm coming today to let everyone know that we're going to be having our first program connected with the sculpture on Thursday, February 28th, 6:30 at Antioch College McGregor Hall. And the program is called Wheeling Gaunt, Onyx Overview. And it's going to be really reflections on his life. His home was on Walnut Street, just north of Dayton, and Stephen Deal lives in the home now. He's done a lot of research on Wheeling Gaunt, so he'll be there making a presentation. We'll also make awards to Mikasa Sims in her first grade class. Last year, they did a project where they created an ABC letter book about Wheeling Gaunt. And what we are hoping that putting the sculpture up and having programming connected with it will do is highlight his life as a philanthropist. He had a saying, it's not what you have, but what you share. He was born in slavery in about 1812 in Kentucky, bought his freedom when he was about 33 years old, began buying real estate in Carrollton, Kentucky. In the 1860s, he sold his Carrollton real estate and moved to Yellow Springs and immediately started buying property here. And also started becoming a philanthropist even at that time. He owned property on the northern end of the village and also on the southern end. And he was connected with leaders across the country, but particularly here with Wilberforce. Daniel Payne was the bishop of the African Methodist Church at the time that Gaunt moved to Yellow Springs, and we believe that might be one of the reasons why he moved. He was an African-American man, and what we believe his life represents is somebody who overcame obstacles and then used the resources that he was able to assemble to share with the community. And most people probably know that at Christmas time, flour and sugar is given to widows, and that's his legacy. He owned the land most of the land where Gaunt Park is now, and he died in 1894 in the summer, and early in the year when his health was failing, he approached the village, letting them know he wanted to donate that property with the stipulation that rents from the property be used to provide flour to widows. And so what that represented during that time, African Americans, really most were not in a position to do that. And he did, and it also, one other thing that's not known is he ran for the school board in 1887. That was the year that Ohio required its schools to be integrated. And it's interesting even beyond that, because in the census of 1870, he and his wife are listed as being illiterate. But I believe sometimes between 1870 and 1887, he probably became literate. And when you see the scale of activities he was doing, it really represents somebody overcoming a lot of challenges, and then, as I was saying, being willing to share that with the community. And so Thursday, February 28th at 6:30, we'll have that program, and we really invite everybody to come to that. We're going to continue to do other programs as we move forward with the fundraising for the sculpture. When the sculpture is up, it's not meant to just be a thing standing there. There's going to be ongoing programming, a mural project. We're already connected with the schools, and we're going to continue to do that as well. So this program represents the beginning of that then.
Excellent. And Kevin, did I also see that Brian Mon is going to speak about the
Yes, the sculptor.
as well?
He will be there, and he already has some small-scale models, and so he'll probably have those too. So he'll be there.
Maquettes.
Yeah.
Right,
And
absolutely.
then we'll have a reception with sugar cookies afterward, using flour and sugar, made by members of the Historical Society. So
Excellent.
with a recipe from that time period as well. And so
great.
we invite everybody to come out. And I left a few of these flyers on the table outside for anybody who's interested then.
All right. Well, thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome.
And I also want to say the village is very excited and proud that the Wheeling Gaunt bronze sculpture will be on village property at the Yellow Springs Station. We cannot wait. Mayor Pam Canine, I believe you have an announcement as well? Or announcements?
Thank you, Council. I'm Mayor Pam Canine, and I'm here tonight because I want to give you a bit of an update on our proclamation policy. One of the really fun things I get to do as being mayor is issue proclamations. And usually those come in two types, and they come to me from people who would like a proclamation read. I don't go out looking for these. They arrive by email or phone or sometimes a letter. They're usually one of two different types. Sometimes they're a solicitation for a proclamation on a national philanthropy or a local proclamation of some sort, a local event. Oftentimes, and usually, there are proclamations celebrating an anniversary of one of our businesses in town, perhaps a birthday of a beloved family member. And sometimes, as these proclamations wind their way through our system, they reach a dead end, and especially the ones with the national organizations. Once the proclamation is written, where does it go from there? To put something in the Yellow Springs News costs money, so I try to watch those dimes and pennies. But more importantly, we can put something out on Channel 5, but we can't right now because our equipment is down. So I thought, here for a little while at least, I would like to try some recognition through the council, through this channel, beauty of YouTube Live and Spectrum Channel 5 Livecast and so forth. So tonight, what I would like to start doing is in the council monthly minutes, I would like to, under announcements, have you record any announcements that deal with proclamations that have been received. Then, these announcements can be read by the Vice President, who can it'll be put out then on, recorded for posterity on our video. But tonight, we're celebrating in a little different way. I have two examples of proclamations for the month of March. The first one is for the American Red Cross, and these generic proclamations that we've been asked to issue as a village, I'm going to post on the bulletin board outside the council chambers so that people can see it as they walk by. The second kinds of proclamations that I'm going to give example of tonight is to honor one of Yellow Springs' finest. I was approached to write a proclamation to celebrate Yellow Springs resident of 64, since 1964, Alfonso L. Smith, Dr. Smith. And Dr. Smith is here with family members tonight and some friends. And I'm going to ask friends and family members to please stand because I would like to recognize Dr. Smith. You may stand as well, sir.
Yeah, I got to get you in the picture.
Yes, thank you. Now, you may be seated, and what I would like to do then is read highlights of the proclamation that Dr. Smith is going to hear on February 27th, which happens to be his birthday. So friends, other friends who want to give him a call, send him a card, please do so. Dr. Alfonso Smith has lived in Yellow Springs since 1964, and he's participated in the life of and nourished our village. Mr. Smith's been active with the tennis community. He served as an instructor for the high school and in community tennis. Dr. Smith retired as an assistant professor of mathematics from Wright State University, and he was instrumental in mentoring and teaching several Yellow Springs students who attended Wright State. He has supported local groups such as the Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, Chamber Music Series, the Unitarian Church, and so much more, which I'll be sharing with the family later in the week. So, congratulations to you, Dr. Smith. We recognize all that you've given to our village, and we wish to commend you, and you'll be seeing a little bit more of this later in the week, sir. All right? Very good. Yes. So thank you, Council, for letting us share in this
Yeah, thank
happy
you.
festivity.
That's
nice
a great
to
day.
start the meeting with some
yes,
good news.
And thank you, Dr. Smith.
Yes.
It's the high point of the evening.
Mayor Kanine, I also wanted to mention that we could certainly put these proclamations on the Facebook page.
That would be wonderful.
And we can make you an admin to do that yourself.
Thank you.
Because you can, like, basically make a photo out of them. And I think we could put them on the website as well, right? Any reason that we couldn't?
Well, the only
On
thing
the
is,
village website?
while Judy's thinking, I always ask the family what's their preference for sharing, for posting, and so forth. So, but for the ones that would like that sort of acknowledgement, I think it's great.
Yep.
You've got your mayor's page
Yeah.
Yes.
on the website.
Great.
All right, thank
All
you.
right.
We'll get that
Thank you.
going.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you, Mayor.
You bet.
All right. Do we have any other announcements from other council members? Lisa, were you gonna?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
My mind is blank. I apologize.
I do have a couple announcements. First of all, I wanted to congratulate our very own Yellow Springs News for 9th year in a row being the best newspaper, recognized by the Ohio Association of Newspapers. I'm not sure that I got that acronym exactly right, but that was really impressive. And yeah, I mean, I do want to say I really appreciate the efforts that are taken to not only capture what's going on in the community, but also to represent all views. So thanks a lot. I also wanted to mention, actually, I wanted to appreciate our council clerk. And I wanted to do that because Judy, since the beginning of the year, has really stepped up in a myriad of ways. And I've been really impressed, Judy, and I know I'd speak for all of us. Thank you so much for helping to make our lives a little bit easier and all the things you're jumping in on. Yeah, I'm really happy. So.
Thank you.
And the other thing I wanted to mention, which makes me a little bit sad, but I want to make sure that the community that's not on social media knows, one of my favorite community members, Lonia Clark, we are trying to find out where he's at. And I know Eric and Jacqueline have been very, active in initiating that search, asking for us to check our auxiliary buildings and, our sheds, our garages and whatnot. So I wanted to make sure to put that out there through this venue as well and on our community access station and to do whatever we can to bring Lonia's smiling face back to our sidewalks. And so I just want to know that we're thinking about you guys and everybody be on the lookout. Okay. So next up, we've got a few items on our consent agenda. We have the minutes from February 4th, and we also have 2 resolutions for wage increases for our village manager and our council clerk, which represent not only a cost of living adjustment like our other staff received, but also appropriate merit increases. So I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next up, we are going to review the agenda, so anything that needs to be changed or added to the agenda.
I have a nomination for the Environmental Commission,
Okay.
which I could just make when I do the
Yep.
reports.
Yep, so that'll be in the report outs. Anything else?
I would request that we move up the special reports for the Economic Sustainability Commission, just because we have Salt here this evening, and it would be helpful if we could move that up.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
I also have started a list of what I'm calling the dribs and drabs agenda list that I don't feel like I don't want to have them lost. We've had a lot of really weighty things to discuss, but at some point I would like to talk about the dark skies correspondence that we've had a couple of times. The notion of a hitching post was raised at one time, and I think that's something I'd like to have us talk about again. And also, Ann Portinga, who we know well, brought an idea, shared what Sandusky, Ohio has done by switching a paid holiday. They selected Columbus Day to give Election Day as a paid holiday for employees of the village, and I wanted to, we don't have Columbus Day as a paid holiday.
I was going to say, you mean Indigenous Peoples' Day, right?
Well, that's what they called it, so I'm just quoting from this newspaper article. But we don't have that holiday as a paid holiday, but we do have President's Day, generally, not today, I suppose, but at some point I'd like to talk about whether we would want to switch those holidays to support voting, or at least have it be optional. But that doesn't have to be tonight,
Okay,
I guess. It's
Yeah.
a lot on our agenda.
so we can,
Future agenda.
The
item.
dribs and drabs.
yes, all
And
right.
so are you asking me to put those on a future agenda item to call through, or were you asking for them to be added?
I don't
anything
know.
tonight?
Yeah, I don't think we have time.
Yeah, I think we can just put them on a, like,
Yeah, thank you.
parking lot. Okay,
But I would like to switch the order of things.
okay,
Put special reports first.
right.
Okay, thank you.
And then the other thing that I would like to add to, I think it's new, I'm gonna call it new business, are the 3 letters, that were requests from, I think, 5 citizens. I wanna respond to each of those, so, I'd like to add that to new business. Okay, anything else? All right, if not, we will move into petitions and communications. Mary Ann.
Okay. We had a communication from the fire chief regarding upgrades in CO2 regulations, an article from Laura Curlis about decriminalizing marijuana in some states and municipalities. The letters that Councilman Hausch was referring to from Pan Reich, Catherine Mooneyhan, Sharon Moeller, Summer McGuire, and Carlos Landaburu were various complaints about the police department, which Brian will talk about under new business. Okay. Kate Hamilton submitted an article about the negative impacts of Airbnb in different cities. The mayor's clerk submitted both a 2018 report of cases coming to the mayor's office as well as January 2019, and there was also a police report for January, I think. And SpringsNet had a letter in regard to the SBA tower lease that the village is considering.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we will next move into, oh, and I should mention that sadly, Village Manager Patty Bates will not be here this evening. Her husband is very ill, and so she needs to be with him. And so that's why she's not here next to me. So now let's move into public hearings and legislation. And first of all, we have ordinance 2019-04. Judy, we can do that by title only.
All right, this is repealing section 452.13, limited parking areas of the codified ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, and enacting new section 452.13, limited parking areas.
Okay, can I get a motion, please?
I move.
Second?
Johnny, are you gonna say something about this, or? Yeah, for the Chargers.
What this does is it gives the opportunity for the overnight visitors that want to park their cars down there, people that want to park here all day. Limits it to 4 hours. The police can give them a warning before we shut the breakers off and stuff like that. They're made for guests, and we got some people that are taking advantage of the situation and bringing their cars down here, leaving them and riding bicycles home and stuff like that. So this just allows the police to give them a warning ticket or cite them to mayor's court.
Okay, all right, thanks, Johnny. Yeah, and I'll just emphasize that the electric chargers were given to the village, and like many communities, the reason that we support these is because we want to promote environmental sustainability. So the idea is that they are to be used for visitors. Hold on a second, okay? I'll recognize you, Sandy. So we want to, basically encourage our visitors to the village to come and shop and, spend money in town and also drive their electric cars. So it sounds like Sandy would like to say something?
I'd like to say several things about that.
Mm-hmm.
Is this mic working? I don't hear my voice very, projected.
It's transmitting to the television.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it
Okay.
doesn't, it doesn't.
Doesn't project
yeah,
to
it doesn't
these people, though?
project, yeah.
Okay. Well, the first thing I wanted to say about this sustainability thing of these electric cars, if you're using coal and fossil fuels to charge an electric car, that does not make it sustainable. Coal is not a renewable resource, and thus in my view, and in the view of many people, it is not sustainable. So that's number one. I don't find these charge stations, unless they're being charged by solar, which I don't, are they?
Our electric is about 95% renewable resources, so, yeah, much better than gas.
Yep. One of the
It's-
things the village is very proud of is our green portfolio of electric.
It's being used by solar? Where is
Wind, hydro, yeah, but go on.
where is the solar coming from in this
Yeah.
town?
I'll talk to you after the meeting.
Okay.
Happy to talk to you. about
Okay,
that.
I'd like to know a little bit more about that. That's the first thing, and the second thing is that I understand that the village, our village pays for the electric bill on this, and that our village people aren't allowed to use it. We pay for it, but we're not allowed to use it, yet we want people to come in and we're going to pay for that. We're actually paying them to come to our town. I mean, from what I've seen from Street Fair, we're getting inundated with tourists. And I just don't see I personally don't see the logic in that of paying somebody to come to our town. I just, I understand the idea of sustainability, but I think sometimes it seems really confusing and complex, and I just really wonder about, is this really sustainable? Where is the solar coming from? I know that Antioch's got a solar array, but the village doesn't have a solar
Yes,
array.
we do. Yep.
Oh,
we
you
have
do?
our own- We have
Okay.
our own
Okay,
village
then,
solar array.
okay, so I'm not up to snuff on everything.
Yep.
Okay, so you're educating me, so there's parts that I don't know, or I haven't seen. So, thank you for the time to be able to express my ignorance.
Thank you. And I also want to say the amount that is spent on those charging stations is very minimal.
$1,300 last year.
Okay, so it's a very low amount, but I think we would rather encourage our visitors to be using electric and charging with renewable energy than using fossil fuels.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
and we want to support our local businesses.
Right, and I just want to add, just a point of clarification, the villagers are allowed to use them. We just don't want the villagers hogging them, like staying there all day, overnight.
Right.
Come get your charge and go.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, thanks a lot. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so this is a first reading, but let's go ahead and do a roll call. Judy?
Sanford. Yes. Stokes.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes.
Hausch.
Yes. All right. The other piece of legislation we have for tonight is ordinance 2019-05. And Judy, let's go ahead and read that in full.
Sure, this is repealing and replacing Chapter 238.04, Section B1, Investment Officers of Chapter 238, Treasurer of Title VI Administration of the Codified Ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio. Whereas on March 15, 1999, Village Council passed Resolution 99-14, which authorized an investment policy for the village, and whereas it is the recommendation of staff to amend said policy to include the investment committee in all investment decisions, now therefore Council for the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio hereby ordains that Section 1, Section 238.04B1 is hereby repealed in its entirety. Section 2, new Section 238.04B1 is new Section 248.04B1 shall be enacted as set forth in Exhibit A, with deletions and strike-through and changes in bold. Section 3, this ordinance shall be in effect in full force at the earliest date permitted by law.
Okay, can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
Okay. I'll speak briefly to this one. So we talked about this at our last meeting, and this encapsulates the importance to council that we are involved in investment decisions. We want to make sure that our investment committee does include elected officials. And one of the things we've seen in the past year is essentially quadrupling our return on investment by being a little bit more proactive about the budgetary funds that we have that are not needed for infrastructure projects to make sure that we are growing our general fund. Judy, one thing I wanted to ask is, there was an attachment referenced, but I didn't see it in the packet, okay?
On the
So I guess
back.
when I clicked the link, I didn't see it, but I do just want to make sure that it does capture the idea that at least one council member is part of that investment committee. So is that part of this?
Let me go back, let me look at it completely and see whether that's referenced in any previous point, because I may have to redo this to
Okay.
just state the content of the investment committee in this section.
Okay,
So let me look at that, and that's not a substantive change since the committee is not
Right.
changing.
Right.
So
I think that was in a separate little section, the membership. Because I'm seeing these two paragraphs with yellow highlighting, you know?
yep. Yeah,
Yep.
there was one about the committee and then one about the membership.
Okay.
So,
Yep.
so if we can just make sure to get that in for the second reading,
Yep.
when we will have a public hearing. But otherwise, we don't need to take a vote on this tonight because we will have a second reading. Okay? So let's move to the Economic Sustainability Commission annual report. Saul Greenberg.
Thank you. Okay, these annual reports are really helpful because we go through the beneficial exercise of taking all the conversation we have and trying to boil it down into succinct statements of goals, which
So-
sometimes means,
Yeah, if you want to speak to the group, you'll have to pull that mic
Yeah, you
out.
can take the mic out and then speak into it, because we hear from the people who watch on the stream that they can't hear unless people are right on the mic.
that makes sense, okay.
Oh, thank you.
So we refer to, and am I correct in thinking that the council has had a chance to read our statement? Okay. But for the other people sitting here who might not have, I'll refer briefly to the goals from last year and then spend more time on the goals projected for this coming year. Last year, we had listed as goal number 1, complete and submit incentive policy to council. An incentive policy entailed a lot of discussion, actually over several years. And ultimately, it resulted in Village Council unanimously approving a resolution 2018-14, creating an economic development incentive policy at the May 21st meeting. So there's a whole policy involved with that, which I won't go into right now, but for those who are interested, it would be in the archives, wouldn't it, at this point?
Yep.
Okay. Goal number 2 last year was engage on localization efforts and support as able. Localization is something that will be repeated in this year's goals, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a couple of minutes when we get there. Goal number 3 was identify an attraction and marketing strategy for the Center for Business and Education. We've had a lot of discussion about that. That's going to carry over also into this year's goals. And one of the things that came out of that was a discussion called a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and there are a lot of notes attached to that. That was a pretty exciting and also beneficial, productive discussion with notes attached. And that also probably at some point will be picked up on and developed even further. But also developing out of that was some specific recommendations to council, again, which are archived. And the goal number 4 for last year was research and advise council on the formation of a DCIC for Yellow Springs. That is a designated community improvement corporation, which is a mechanism for being able to get a lot of different business done. Eventually, it's still in formation. It got the Economic Sustainability Commission itself did a lot of work on it, had some invited guests, and passed it on up with recommendations to council. Council has taken it on now and is in the process of formulating that body, which we refer to as a DCIC. There were other interesting items also that are included in the report. But coming to the 2019 goals for the Economic Sustainability Commission, goal number 1, we decided to put down support a CBE marketing strategy with the actions identified in the ECE special report to council on the CBE that was dated December 5th, 2018. Bullet points under this goal about developing or supporting a CBE marketing strategy are rebranding the CBE to focus on the businesses that we wish to attract. Bullet point 2 is investigate real estate groups that would be a good match for the property and for Yellow Springs. Next bullet point, develop a simple site plan to illustrate how buildings could fit on the irregular parcels that now would exist on that piece of land. Next point was research incentives available from Greene County. Next point, explore local collaborations and expansion opportunities. And that ties in with another goal, which we'll get to soon. The next point was reach out to citizens outside the ESC for input. Some of that has already begun, but it needs to be developed further. The next point was develop something we called personas of potential industries that would be appropriate for the CBE. In other words, what kinds of industries could we imagine that would be a good fit here in Yellow Springs that might come from people elsewhere? And part of that came up in our discussion when we did the SWOT analysis, but we need to develop that further. All of these conversations get very interesting and intricate, and if we don't watch our time, we never get on to anything else. Any one of these points is really important and rich. The last bullet point under goal number 1, supporting the CBE marketing strategy, is research similar communities who have done industrial/business development. All that's under goal number 1 to support the CBE marketing strategy, and any one of those bullet points in and of itself could be a major project. And we might be here again next year carrying some of those same bullet points forward. Goal number 2, identify new revenue-generating opportunities for village government. Bullet point 1, assist in research to understand allowances/restrictions on revenue generation for municipalities per the Ohio Revised Code. It's all well and good for us to have great ideas, but we are a government or a governing entity, and we need to explore and research some of those possibilities before we just go down a lot of rabbit holes and end up not being able to do something we spent months on. Next bullet point, facilitate community conversations to discuss impacts of various alternatives. We've had community conversations in the past on some of our work, and we would intend to continue to do such. Next bullet point there, develop an economic development strategy focused on localism and entrepreneurship. I'll come back to that in a second. It goes along with explore business incubator/entrepreneur center. Localism was one of our goals last year. Michael Schuman came to town and some workshops were done around some of his work in terms of looking at, buying locally, doing things locally, investing in local enterprises, and it's just a bit more complicated than only buying local, because we also want to find ways to encourage enterprises to locate here and use as much of the local energy that already exists, which ties in with the next and last goal, number 3, identify business needs for success. i.e. space, cost of doing business, utilities, workforce, etc. Once again, it's all well and good to have idealistic conversations, but if we don't take into account some of the realities of, for instance, utility costs, then we're barking up the wrong tree and wasting our time when we could be using it productively otherwise. So part of that would be to survey existing businesses to understand their needs related to expansion, utilities, etc. We've talked about that for a long time. There have been some conversations with local business people, but we feel that we need to do more of that. And the last bullet point under goal number 3, which is the last goal, collaborate with Planning Commission on the update of the comprehensive plan to ensure business needs are appropriately addressed. We have various commissions, and somebody on our commission pointed out that sometimes the work of the various commissions actually overlap, and it would be so much more productive if we got together in the first place. And so we're going to do that, and maybe that will also, we might do that with the Planning Commission and perhaps with other commissions, and it might encourage more cross-fertilization. So that's it in terms of what our written report is for our annual report. Any questions or comments?
Council?
Well, I don't know if there's questions, but I just would like to applaud this commission. This is a very hardworking commission. Last year, a lot was accomplished. Saul, thank you for being a chair. I know you work very hard and focus on this. Karen Wintro, thank you for being an amazing secretary. And I'm looking forward to another year of action with this commission.
Yeah, and I want to kind of tag on to that by saying, I feel like the Economic Sustainability Commission continues to add capacity for council. And I appreciate that you guys are always receptive to our goals and what we are trying to accomplish. And I do want to mention one thing with the third goal is making sure that when we look at business needs, that we balance things like utility costs with the service that we provide, right? I mean, one of the things that we need to remember is the fact that we have local utilities means that we can get the electricity up and running a lot quicker than a DP&L that would deprioritize us. Similarly, I think, the businesses that we're trying to attract hopefully appreciate that we are looking at sustainability, which has always been a village value.
Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot.
I'm glad to have the opportunity.
All right.
Should I ask Saul a question?
Sure, but you'll have to come up to the mic, Scott. Don't want anyone to miss that question.
Okay. My name's Scott Fife. I'm a village resident and a member of the SpringsNet Committee, and I was wondering if Mr. Greenberg would be able to respond to this question. Saul, would any of the following appeal or overlap with the goals and bullet points that you've expressed tonight? A municipally owned and operated fiber optic to the premises network that was not for profit, that was operated by the village with all revenues going to the village. Do you see any of that as addressing the goals of localism, localism, revenue sources that we hadn't anticipated, utilities costs, and workforce development, and any of those kinds of things? It's a shameless plug on my part.
Sure.
To ask that question. But
Yeah, well, and I can just
couldn't
jump.
pass it up.
I can just jump in for Saul because that is on our 2019 goals, and we are planning to tackle that. I think we have gotten to far enough that we might not need the ESC to weigh in on that, and we're now at the point where we've got some potential vendors that I think we want to have some conversations with by the middle of the year.
Great.
Thanks,
So,
Brian.
Yep,
For weighing in there.
of course. All right, that's a goal that several of us are passionate about. All right.
Thank you, Saul.
Lisa, did you want to do the ACC one
We
as
can
well?
come
or-
back to that
Okay,
later.
okay, great. So then we're gonna hop back to citizen concerns and let Saul take off. So just a couple reminders. The citizen concerns is for items that are not on the agenda. We ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes, and if you can be more concise, that's also ideal. And the other thing I want to emphasize, because I do think it's important, given a meeting we had 2 times ago, that we ask that you refrain from clapping, snapping, waving signs, because we do want to encourage all citizens to feel comfortable with sharing their feedback and not being intimidated because there's one group in the room that's, on one side and they don't feel comfortable with speaking. So saying that, I saw maybe some folks sign up? Oh, just Kevin signed up? Okay, so do we have any citizen concerns this evening? Bob Baldwin?
I didn't sign up, so I'll just.
That's okay. You don't have to sign up. Please come up to the mic.
Well, the community has really been roiled last 3 weeks about Meister and that 54-unit building, which I'll talk about the building in 2 weeks. The Meister situation certainly shows, quoting from a council member in the 7 February issue of Yellow Springs News, we have a horrible breakdown in trust between the police and the community and the council. And our staff, we have to go after this. That's absolutely true. There was another letter in the Yellow Springs News besides Michael Murphy's that I wish everybody would read. And that is a very short letter from a lady that has lived in town for 3 years, has never met a patrolman or a policeman or the chief downtown in Weavers, in restaurants, shopping, parking, not one. And I think that's, to me, a major part of the disconnect. Meister is not God reincarnated, but the town knows him. They meet him. He married a local gal. His kids go to school. He may go to church. I don't know whether he does or not, but he is part of the community, and he has been for 7 years. I get around. I'm all over town, and I do not know another patrolman. I've met a couple, not long enough to even know their name, but they may be equal or better than Meister on community policing, but the town has no idea. There's no interchange. I think council has to address that. Figure out a way, and there is a way, and in 2 weeks I'll tell you one of the ways that I think will figure out how to get people to live in Yellow Springs. Now let me recount a little bit. I was 15 years old in 1949, do your own math. Our chief of police was Russell Bradley and Estill Boggs. I don't think anybody here is old enough to remember Bradley or Boggs. Boggs drove a black 35 Ford. They had an old shack where right near where the train station is now built. But anyway, we had, and I remember great, under Chief McKee, we had Newsom, we had Banner, we had Livingston, we had Winks, we had Jones, and we had Al Pierce, who lived in Xenia. I never did know where Jones lived. But we had local patrolmen. They were part of the community. They were part of the fabric. They were known to all, and it was magical, the way that police force operated. And I can't relate that success to any one person, but together it worked. Now, choosing a police chief and hiring a patrolman has to be a difficult task. I know it is. But we certainly have missed on a couple. And I'll take 10 more seconds to talk about one. He was one of 39 applicants, according to the Yellow Springs News. He was fired by the West Carrollton Police Department. Then he went to Jamestown. Then we hired him. That is the same man that pulled my next-door neighbor, Talitha Green, out of her car while she was asleep down the alley from the Gulch. She'd celebrated too much. She called her wife, said, "Honey, I don't want to drive. Can you pick me up?" "Mom, I'll be down in 30 minutes. But before she could get down, we had a patrolman patrolling the alley, which certainly is one of his duties. That's something he should be doing. He saw Talitha Green, Jerry Green's wife, asleep in the passenger seat. He banged on the window and said, roll the window down. Talitha drives semis. She is a CBL licensed truck driver. She suffers no fool. She rolled it down this far. And he said, I want to see your driver's license and registration. She said, I'm not going to give it to you. I'm on private property in my own van, being quiet, not bothering anybody. 2 seconds later, he smashed the window, pulled her out with another policeman, threw her in the cruiser, took her down to Xenia, threw her in the jail. Now, that is just the opposite of community policing. Community policing means he goes down the alley to check, he sees some woman in a passenger seat asleep, he knocks on the door, if she only rolls it down, that's fine. He says, are you all right? I'm just checking. I'm sure Talitha said, my daughter is going to come pick me up in about 20 minutes. And the patrolman should have said, I will be down again in 10, 20 minutes and make sure you're all right. Now that is community policing. I don't know if Meister is any better or any worse than the other officers we have, but I don't think you people even know their names. I don't think you've run into them any better than I have. So anyway, thanks for listening. But you got to do a better job, and I think you can.
Thanks, Bob. And actually, I do want to, since we do have Chief Carlson here, let him share something with you before we have about some of the things we're going to do to expose our officers more. But as you're coming up, I do want to mention, Bob, one thing I'm really excited about that we talked about for a while and have started is scenario-based training, where our officers are reviewing these scenarios that better or different decisions could have been made. And I think that's really effective, and a lot of departments that are being noted for being progressive are doing that, and we're doing it in Yellow Springs. So I want to compliment the chief on that. And then if you could just share, we had a recent email about some of the things our officers will be doing.
Absolutely. We have addressed various ways that officers will be able to interact with the public, be more visible, and every one of the staff had to provide suggestions. We had some real good ones. We do have to move some scheduling around to get some of the night crew to be more visible during the day. But we've got great ideas in assisting the senior center, having people sit in with a dispatcher for an hour or so they can do those kind of things. We are going to continue the foot patrol and step it way up, so officers, weather permitting, are out of their vehicles just as much as they are in them. We are getting to a point with the new hire where we should be able to have 2 officers on at all times, which I'm very excited about. I don't have my email, but I had quite a list.
In the spring, we're going to have our bike patrol.
Oh, bike patrol is coming in full force. We are getting the bikes ready. They meet the IPMBA standards. That's the International Police Mountain Biking Association. We have some certain qualifications that we have to meet. We have 2 bikes that are road ready. We do have some older bikes. I'm hoping to add 2 more to the list. We have a new cruiser. All the cruisers will have bike hitches added to them. When we have 2 officers on, we're going to have as many officers on bike patrol as possible. We are a biking community, and I think that's important, and we're very excited about that. We are continuing the scenario-based training. That will be our next 4-hour session is the week of March 1st, and we'll be catching up and updating officers on the proactive approach to getting us out there and in front of people. We're also looking at assisting Mills Lawn with some homework help. John Gudgel has come up with a great idea where we want to have officers in a regular class mode. As long as they're with a teacher, we can have a nice presentation there. Sergeant Watson just finished 2 days of empowerment at the middle and high school and at Mills Lawn. That was a great
experience. So we're real excited about these things that we have coming.
Thank you, Chief. All
Thank you.
right. Yeah, and as you're coming up, you can come on up. I do want to say that, you know, to that point, we would love other recommendations, constructive recommendations about how our officers could interact with our citizens so that they get to know them better. My sense is that the chief and the police team are really open to this, and so we'd love to hear ideas. Okay?
Hi, Jim Zahner. I live in Park Place. I've been here for about 50 years. Not as long as Bob, but I remember all of those officers you talked about and the effectiveness they had. We're in a quagmire right now, and I don't know how we ever get out of it. This is an unforced error. Now, we had I'm talking about Meister, of course. You know, we've had situations with an officer pulling a gun. We've had situations with an officer, attacking a citizen. And okay, so there are a lot of serious issues, and Meister gets busted for not giving a drunk a ticket. Now, that puts me in mind of Alice's Restaurant, where Arlo Guthrie is in jail with the mother rapers and the father stabbers. And they say, "What are you here for?" He said, "Well, I'm here for littering." And he looked at him with malice. That's how this situation seems to be to me. It seems he did everything that we wanted him to do when we had our meeting after the New Year's Eve disaster. Everything we wanted him to do. He took down the emotion. He got the drunk off the road. He got the drunk home. But he didn't give him a ticket and didn't throw him in jail. So how is this an issue? Well, it's an issue, could be an issue in Ferguson, where the police department is used as part of the revenue stream. Why else would he be disciplined for that? Or we have to assume that what was being charged was irrelevant, that it was something to settle something, and the charges themselves really don't have anything to do with it. And then we have a situation where the outcomes are predictable. We knew what the result was going to be in each of the hearings. We knew. I mean, it was pretty clear how it was going to come out. And so that's why we got an issue of trust. And it's a serious one, and I don't know how we get out of it. Next, I have a real concern about my tax monies being used to defend the village against someone I think is being persecuted. That's not a good use of my tax money.
And that is 3 minutes.
Bingo. Okay, I said what I got to say.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. Any other comments? Sandy?
Yes, I have a comment to make about Officer Meister's situation, and it was stated that they felt that the officer that went to the scene should not have gone there alone. And I just wonder how it is Officer Meister's responsibility that he not go there alone. Wouldn't it be the management's responsibility to ensure that he wasn't, if he's not capable of handling a situation alone, then maybe he shouldn't have been scheduled alone? And whose responsibility is it for the scheduling? And whose responsibility is it to manage the officers that go? It just seems to me this is not the responsibility of Dave Meister. This is the responsibility of the people that are managing the police department. And if there's any fault with an officer going to a scene alone and an officer who has already been on overtime not going but being available to go? How is that his responsibility when he's trying to be respectful? I see Officer Meister as being extremely respectful to the management, to what they're asking, and trying to do his job to the best of his ability. So I just don't understand the course of events here. So I just wanted to say I think it's management's problem, not his.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks, Sandy. Any other citizen concerns? Sharon?
Yes, there are way too many things just not explained. I don't understand how the department works. I don't understand why, because I've been asking this question for like 4 years. I put it in the letters to the editor, and nobody ever answers. What is the program? How does somebody advance in the program? Do they do it by merit, or do they just do it because somebody likes them the best, or what? And who is over who and why? All that should be explained to us, because I can't, from what I can see, and if he was so bad that he can't be responsible and he's putting our community in danger, then why don't we know about it? I mean, I really think this man is being maligned. He really is, and that's a shame. He's not just a good police officer, he's also a Yellow Springs resident and neighbor. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Any other comments? Yes.
Hi, my name is Alice Earl Jenkins, and I know Zoe Meister, and I know her husband, and I've known Zoe longer than I did her husband. And Officer Meister has come to my house different times, and he has always been helpful, and he has always been patient. And I read the article, the short article and the long article, twice, and I'm saying this is not making sense to me. And then I said, well, maybe someone misunderstood the new directions or something, and they got it mixed up. And maybe the person had forgotten what the instructions that they had, what they were supposed to do and not to do. But it seemed like nobody was following up on that to clarify what had happened. Because I don't think that Meister not helping someone because he had not been authorized, that he should have been punished. That person should have, been so upset with him because he didn't go because he knew that he had to have someone at a different position to give him permission, the way I understood what was in the paper. And so it just doesn't seem that he was at fault. It was some kind of mix-up there, that somebody didn't understand something, the guidelines of what have you, and that he should not have been pointed out that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, well, we appreciate the feedback. I should say at this point that the report from the pre-disciplinary hearing we did not receive today. So we do not have that to share. There was a late, filing that delayed that decision. So we hope to have that very soon, and then we'll be able to follow up and I think respond to some of the questions that you have based on the investigation and the hearing that is done. So with that, Sandy, something else?
Yeah.
Okay, if we can make it quick, that would be great.
The two things that I talked about the last time I
Yeah,
was here.
actually, you missed it. Lisa put those on the agenda, on a future agenda. So
Okay.
that's
So
been responded to.
both of them are on to a different agenda.
Yeah, we haven't decided what meeting, but we
Okay.
haven't forgotten.
Okay, thank you.
Right
You're
before
welcome.
you came in.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Okay, so we're gonna hop back to special reports, and Lisa, are you doing the Arts and Culture Commission?
Sure, I can do that. Usually we would have our chair come, but we are in a chair transition. I'd like to recognize, though, Brittany Baum, who served as the chair of this commission and just been wonderful to work with, but she's taking a hiatus so that she can open her new business in town. And we understand that. And I'd like to share that Cheryl Durgans has stepped into the role of chair.
Great.
But I didn't feel, that was like last week, and I didn't feel like it was fair to say, congratulations for stepping up. Now you get to give a presentation on Monday. So I offered to go through the report. I don't know, Judy, would it be possible to, because it's art and culture, our annual report is very visual. One of the things that happened last year was that the Art and Culture Commission really took a good look at our mission statement, because as a commission, it had really evolved. And we realized that in order to better align with village goals and also to serve council better and also to do work that was meaningful for the members, we needed to make it very clear that art and culture in the village for us isn't just about, oh, isn't that a pretty statue? You know, but that instead we believe that public arts add value by providing educational opportunities, activism, economic sustainability, and an improved quality of life. And we last year wrapped up a few ongoing projects, and I really want to focus on our 2019 goals, because I think you'll see the way our role as activism through arts is really beginning to shine through. But I'll go just briefly through some of the key elements that we'll carry through. One is the Village Inspiration and Design Award. That's known as VIDA, is what we call it. And it's a lovely statue, metal statue, and the purpose of that is to recognize the value of public art to our community. It was in the Women's Park, it was at the Lapides Lynch Home. Most recently, the muralists of Yellow Springs received the VIDA Award. In the report, there's some great pictures of the murals. There was a big mural restoration project as well as a new mural that's there next to the Emporium. So we have done a lot of work last year with those. The John Bryan Community Gallery that you're basically in right now out in the hallways here of this building is through a partnership with the Arts Council. And this is the home of the Art Council's permanent collection. It's a rotating show. The first exhibit opened on January 19th, 2018. So we hope that people from the community will continue to come and enjoy the art. I'd like to highlight our involvement with Porch Fest. That was a wonderful event to foster our spirit of community and celebrate local musicians. That was in October. It was a gorgeous day. Bands played throughout the village on people's porches and patios and decks. There were 38 acts performed at 21 sites, and that will also happen again this year. There's a picture of the restoration of the Jungle mural. That's back in Keith's Alley. Artist and villager Sarah Dickens restored her original work. The Art and Culture Commission also have approved the Wheeling Gaunt Sculpture Project location that we talked about earlier this evening with Dr. Magruder's presentation. So let's talk a little bit about the 2019 goals and budget request. And I'd like to read the goals in full. The first one is to use the arts to amplify discussion and ignite actions related to anti-racism, costs of living and running a business in the village, local environmental justice, and policing and community relations. So what our commission decided to do is rather than to have the Art and Culture Commission in a little box in our goals, we looked at all of the goals and said, how does our commission hook into that? And what can we do through expressions of art and culture to amplify discussion and ignite action? The second goal is to use the arts as a lens to explore placemaking in Yellow Springs. And briefly, placemaking inspires people to work together to reinvent themselves and their community and face these challenges on their own terms. I would hope, Mr. Zahner, that what the Art and Culture Commission might do around igniting change and amplifying discussion around policing and community relationships may help us to get out of that quagmire.
Still have the legalities to get out of.
Yes. We will, our third goal is to administer the VITA Award. We'll keep that going. The fourth is to provide support to the John Bryan Community Gallery, working in close collaboration with the Yellow Springs Arts Council, and we are also requesting some budget to continue to provide micro grants to emerging artists. Our total budget request for Art and Culture Commission is $5,000 this year. I think that's $1,000 more than we had last year, I think.
Possibly.
Possibly. But the reason why is that you'll see in the table, the way I merged the table on 1 and 2 is because we'd like to use a $2,000 budget for the number 1 and number 2. And then we believe that we'll need as much of as $1,000 to continue to do VITA and the community gallery. And then we would like to have $2,000 to provide micro grants to emerging artists. So I would like to make a motion that the Art and Culture Commission have a $5,000 budget in 2019.
I'll second that motion. So I guess all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And I should mention, for those that aren't aware, we established several years ago a total budget for all our commissions to deliver on village goals of $25,000, which is less than 1% of the village budget. So we dedicate a small amount of the overall village budget to promote economic sustainability, arts and culture, the Human Relations Commission, environmental, and that sort of thing, to deliver on specific goals. And we believe that arts and culture also brings important economic and community development benefits to the village.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Lisa. Okay, we are now hopping into old business, and the first thing, Sharon, please.
I just wanted to say, those are great goals. Please, when you hire a new village manager, make sure that that person knows how important those sort of things are to this community.
Definitely. Thanks, Sharon. No doubt about that. Okay, so in terms of old business, the first thing we have is the police department assessment proposal. And Lisa and Mary Ann are bringing that forward. I don't know who's going to present.
You or me?
How about if I start?
You start?
You amplify.
Okay. We'll do a duet.
Great.
Okay. Actually, last year, Lisa and I had talked about setting aside money for assessing the police department because we wanted to have a placeholder for that. We felt that that was probably something we would want to do in 2019. And because of recent events and the emotional, I would say the emotional tenor that has happened within at least some segment of the community, and the impact that that has had within the community and on the police department, as well as the fact that none of us sitting up here are specialists in policing, nor should we be. And I don't think anyone else in the room is either, other than our chief. And as probably everyone knows, policing in this country has been evolving over the last several decades. Mostly, we've known about all the negative things that have happened. It's much harder, as I think, as probably people realize, when positive things happen. They don't usually get reported, and they're not as sensational. So we're very aware of the negative things. And in this community, a couple council meetings ago, when there was a discussion going on, it became clear that, one, a lot of people in the community, as was said tonight, do not know other officers other than Officer Meister, and the feeling that there is a level of mistrust of the police department. So Lisa and I got together, I don't know, a couple weeks ago or so, and said, we think it's time to really bring in someone from the outside who has experience. So we have written a proposal that is listed here about what we think is needed, what we would want an outside consultant to do. We've also started talking with people regionally and nationally to find out, well, who might we bring in? And I'll just say something about Bob Wasserman. So as Lisa and I have been talking with people, one person's name came up a number of times, Bob Wasserman, who went to Antioch College, actually worked with Chief McKee, and is now an international consultant on police reform and police community relations. And I actually happened to get him on the phone today, and he indicated that he would very much like, he actually, since he went to Antioch, he's married to a woman from Yellow Springs, Don Hollister's cousin, and his brother lives here now, and his nephew lives here. So he has expressed willingness to come and meet with us pro bono, just to have a initial conversation. And I'm very hopeful that something will arise from that. We also have other people we're talking to as well. So I will stop and let you.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would want to add is to reinforce that this was something that was identified as an opportunity for the community back in November as we were going into budgeting. And for me personally, this is not in reaction. This is not in reaction to any specific event. It's more in recognition that we have an opportunity to do better. And that part of doing better is to have some capacity building. We talk a lot about capacity in the council and in the commissions, and I've talked about capacity a lot to Chief Carlson, because there's only so many hours in the day, and we can have aspirations to do better, and we need to all do better, but we need some help. And so I just really want to reinforce that we certainly recognize the climate in the community, and we care deeply about that, but this isn't, for me, only about that. It's also about the fiscal health of our budget and the amount of money that we spend, how our tax dollars are spent, how our policies and practices are, and most importantly, about actions and behaviors that positively impact police community engagement. We have this really important document, the Guidelines for Village Policing, and we have an opportunity to really understand how to bring that to life in a very meaningful way. So I'm really thrilled that we have the opportunity to have this kind of expert advice. The other thing that Mary Ann and I are proposing in this proposal is that we believe that a community meeting should be convened sooner rather than later. It would be ideal to have our consultant on board before that, but it's a public meeting, and so we'll roll tape, and the consultant can watch it. But we think as soon as in March, we would want to have the village host a community meeting that will likely be facilitated by the Village Mediation Program. We've been in touch with John Gudgel and others. Marianne is a liaison to Village Mediation. And we also understand that both the 365 Project and the McKee Group are, have stepped forward and said they would like to be involved with that. So that is really a top priority, to provide community members with a forum to discuss their concerns regarding the YSPD and their recommendations for change in a positive way. So both to understand that there are things that have been done that are improvements, and there are things that we can have an opportunity for growth. But I think it really is going to take the community to pull together with the village and the PD. Boy, you said it, I'm just going to keep using that quagmire word, to move forward together. And we cannot move forward together without the community also getting involved in a positive way. So we hope that this community meeting is an opportunity for that. And we hope to be actively working on this assessment by April. So we really have this with a hot fire underneath it. And I know that I have, and Marianne and I have the support of Chief Carlson and his team. They've been supportive of this since back in November when it was originally proposed. So this is not something that anybody's doing to anybody else. This is something that we're working on together.
Yeah, I just want to say, and I know Kevin's got some comments as well, I really appreciate you guys laying out a timeline that I think is very aggressive in a good way. And I like the ideas around looking at this comprehensively. You know, I can't underscore enough, and I thought Kate Hamilton's letter in the newspaper really highlighted the great work that the Justice System Task Force did in a short time, over 2 years. And I, again, want to emphasize, on behalf of all of council, we have been very clear about our commitment to high-quality village policing, keeping in mind that, you know, we are in an environment where the kinds of training that officers get are antithetical to what we want in this village. And we are fighting against a system that makes it really hard. But it's been great to see the openness of Chief Carlson and the team to things like 40 hours of crisis intervention training, to the scenario-based training, and to trying to wrap our heads around what this means. But, you know, I definitely agree with Lisa and Marianne that having some expertise in this area is where we're at. And so, you know, I really support this initiative, and I think it's great that you guys have put so much work into it, and that you've identified some people that really understand our community. So, Kevin, I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate the work that's been done. I think it's really important to echo one of the comments that was made about, you know, we want to look at policies, procedures, budgets, et cetera. It's not a reaction to any particular thing that's gone on. You know, in any organization where you have, you know, policies and procedures, one ought to want to be in what you might call a continuous improvement mode. Regardless of how good, bad, or ugly things are, you know, in this period of time, you always want to look towards improvement. And it takes, you know, an assessment process, an opportunity to step back and evaluate things, to look at what we can do better. Because while we're all still here living and breathing, we can all be better at what we do. And I wanted to, and I appreciate again that there's a place for some of the work that I wanted to speak about. And I think the timeline does talk about it in phase 2. It does touch on some of these things. There's a lot of good things that the police officers do, you know, but we don't get to hear about those kind of things. I think the changes that the chief is putting forward in terms of the officers getting out on the streets more, becoming beat cops, if you will, I think is really important, showing the faces. And I said earlier, when we were speaking, that when I had my photo taken for the village website, you can look and see all 5 of us. I'm looking at somebody who might not be on there yet. Yeah, but I said, well, and you're right. I didn't know all the police officers at the time, so I wanted an opportunity to see photos of them. I don't know if we need to have bios, but something like that, where there's a blast of information where you can go and see, hey, here's your YSPD, this is Bobby, the police officer, I'm just making up names. But so you can see photos and see things about those officers, and it helps humanize the officers more. Officers are going into schools, helping kids with homework, helping at the senior center, and maybe that gets lost in the noise, of these 1 or 2 things that get a lot of the bandwidth. And I would just think we ought to have a formal process, whether it's a complete separate website or like a sort of a marketing campaign, but something talking about all the good things that the police are doing. And so I think, again, what I've looked at with the timeline, looks like there's a place for that in phase 2, and I just look forward to any effort that can be made to shed a brighter light on all the good work that the police department, and not just the officers, but the entire staff, the dispatchers, Florence, everything, there's a lot of good stuff being done, and we don't hear enough about that. So I think we ought to formalize a process for sharing the good news.
Thank you. And, the other thing that I haven't seen is we said this evening is that we do have a new permanent commission, the Justice System Commission, that Kaneda will be the liaison for. And I think that, I don't want to speak for you, but I think some of what you're talking about is in scope for Justice System Commission.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And I actually think that, especially thinking about this assessment, that would be a really great jumping off point for Justice System Commission, so that we have a basis for the next work that we do. And I really want to be able to have that together so that we can take part in this process as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great. I appreciated that you guys contemplated that, the commission would be involved as soon as they are formed.
So I would think that in March, we hopefully will have both a community meeting and identify who will work with us. And then ideally, then that work would happen in April or start in April.
So do we have any questions or comments from citizens on this topic?
Too many.
Yeah,
Too
there's
many.
plenty to talk about. Well,
Too many.
that community conversation will be coming soon. Okay. Okay, well, let's move into the transient guest lodging proposal. And Marianne, I believe that's yours.
Yeah. So transient guest lodging, and what that means is people who either in their own homes or in a separate home or in a bedroom in their home or in their accessory dwelling provide lodging for people who come into town for maybe a day, a weekend, maybe a week for a workshop. And the term now is called transient guest lodging. And probably most people are familiar with the organization Airbnb, which has made this most popularized around the world. You can go to Mongolia and get an Airbnb yurt or something similar to that. So Yellow Springs has 30-some people that are, or 30-some either people or sites that do Airbnb. I actually have done that as an apartment, and I rent out a bedroom in my home, full disclosure, on Airbnb. And there are benefits and there are concerns about Airbnb. Benefits, I'll speak for myself, it supplies needed income, so that I'm not just on Social Security and my council income. It also provides sites for people to come People come to visit their family. Maybe their family doesn't have room for them. They can come and stay someplace. People come to workshops. People come to classes, yoga classes. People who are at Antioch Midwest come for their week while they have to be here. People come to just enjoy Yellow Springs or to go hiking. So people love coming to Yellow Springs. So it provides income for the whole tourist service industry when the Airbnb. The downside, well, there are a couple downs, 3 probably. One is that if someone buys a house that maybe was rented long-term or maybe could have been sold, usually they're small houses, then that takes that house off the market for someone either to rent or to buy. And that is a big concern here. So that's one concern. Another concern is the same kind of issue where if there's just a house where no one's living and people are coming in and out, neighbors don't know who's coming in and out, and it can have an impact on the neighborhood. The third concern, and Jim Hammond might have this concern, is that if people come and stay in Airbnb, they're not staying in the hotel, or they're not staying at Morgan House or the Yellow Springs Motel. So those are probably the main concerns. So given that concerns have been expressed, the Housing Advisory Board has agreed to host a meeting. We will send out notices to everyone who does Airbnb in town, and anyone in the community can come to this meeting to talk about what they like about it, what they don't like about it, and the information is going to come back to Council and Planning Commission. It's tentatively proposed that every existing Airbnb site would be grandfathered in, and tentatively proposed, I mean, I think that that's a given probably, tentatively proposed that you have to live on the site if you have an Airbnb. So if it's a bedroom, a accessory dwelling, or attached or detached, as opposed to just buying up individual houses. So that is our proposal. I'm putting this out for council to approve or not, and if people in the community want to say anything now, but we would, of course, advertise this.
Right, and I do want to highlight that, when we started the transient guest lodging tax, we applied that across the board. So it applies to Airbnbs, it applies to guest houses, it applies to hotels, which is something that most communities in Greene County do not do, but we thought that it was very important that that was applied fairly across the board. And I did think Kate Hamilton's article that she provided that talks about things that communities are doing to balance some of the losses that happen with Airbnb was very informational. So questions or comments about transient guest lodging?
I have a question.
Lisa.
There's a lot going on with planning and now another community conversation. So what's kind of the timing of this that you see?
I don't know, but the first step would be for council to say, yes, we support this happening. I don't think that this topic has the kind of interest that the police issue does. I mean, I think it's probably more limited to the people who are doing it and maybe neighbors of where it's happening. So I don't see it as I'm not imagining that it would be attended by 200 people or
Right.
something like that. So.
I think it's excellent, though, to
Yeah.
take a look. Thank you.
And I definitely support, I think, I know this has been a concern that Kevin's brought forward, we've talked about for a while, and, I think the main thing is we want to be proactive so that we don't get into a situation where we're having more of a housing crisis because of too much transient guest lodging.
Yeah, and that's really, and Marion did a great job with what you've put forward, and I certainly support it. But certainly, it's the simple math. if if we have a housing shortage now, and, houses are coming out of the stock quicker than we're placing, not just houses, but dwellings, back in stock or available for people. I think we're a small village, and we don't compare necessarily to, LA and Rome, these places who are talking about some larger numbers, still having the same impact. So on a percentage basis, we would have the same problem. Really, so I don't want to go into detail. I'm glad we're taking it, moving the ball forward. I agree also, it's probably not as high a priority in terms of being a hot topic as the policing. So as long as the discussion has begun, and it stays on our radar and we eventually come around to it, I think we will appreciate moving, or at least talking about it now, as opposed to way down the road.
Okay.
So council is in agreement to support this, and
Yes. Sharon?
just a minute, could I,
Yes.
and is there a concern about when we do this?
Curious.
This is not unrelated to the affordable housing for the seniors, because now people make more money from the little tiny apartments that used to be affordable for older folks. One thing I would like to put out there for the people that think that the big affordable apartment house will ruin their property values. I would like to say that Yellow Springs property isn't expensive because they're great, wonderful manses with fabulous swimming pools. They're expensive because everybody wants to live in Yellow Springs. And I rather suspect sometimes that what puts the people off more than, 4 stories is the word affordable. So they think there's going to be poor people living near them, and that's what they're a little bit worried about. But, we've been among you all the time, and a lot of the poor people are also the artists and the musicians. So it would just be Oakwood without them. So I understand why people want, if I own property, I'd want to make money off of it too. But you can't, I really appreciate what Home Inc. does, keeping things affordable for people that don't have a lot of money. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, then we will move to the village manager
Vetting process.
vetting, right? Yeah. Had trouble, this blue kind of gets me sometimes. Yes. Kanetta, tell us a little bit about what you've been working on with the village manager vetting process.
So I have created a very rough draft of a rubric. And so this past Friday, we met with the committee, the citizen committee that's helping with the village manager process, and our subcommittee, who is on the scoring and assessment subcommittee. We took a look at this very briefly, and we're planning on meeting again to go over this, but it's pretty much to just kind of go through and see which candidates have the skills that we're looking for, the education that we're looking for. And so I have both a rubric and a skills matrix. After we talked a bit about it, we figured we would just stick with the rubric, kind of nix the matrix because it was kind of confusing and whatnot. So we're actually going to break the rubric apart. And for our first pass, we're going to look at relevant education and relevant experience. And then as we move forward, we're going to go deeper into that experience with the skills and the past performance piece. And I really am excited about meeting with the subgroup. I think that we have committee members who are really knowledgeable about the different skills that we're looking for and have the ability to make those more nuanced so we're not really vague about what we're looking for. So we're meeting on Friday. So with that, we'll have a more in-depth rubric, specifically looking at pulling out those skills, past and performance, that kind of go deeper into what we're looking for in a manager.
Okay. Great. So I think the first draft on the rubric looks good. Couple things that came to my mind, but a lot of them, like as I ran down, like the ones I was, checking off were there. I do want to make sure that we're capturing the project management piece, which I don't know that means a separate assessment, but just that's highlighted somewhere. The other thing I noted was, I thought the reference to IT was interesting. I assume maybe Kevin Stokes influenced that a little bit. And what I thought would be good to flesh that out, sort of with the others, is to highlight using IT to gain efficiencies. So like, having that skill, not necessarily to be an IT expert, but to know how to employ it in an effective way. And then the other thing that occurred to me is making sure that we have a place to assess some of those soft skills. Communications is covered, which is great, but I'm also thinking about objectivity. We have that thing in there about healthy skepticism. So some of those things that, I think they're embodied in the description of the skills we're looking for, but I thought maybe there's room for one more line for something like that.
Absolutely.
I think it looks really good.
Thank you.
And just so everyone knows, the deadline for applications was this past Friday, February 15th. Judy, how many applicants do we have?
There was a little flood there, but I think we've got 37.
37. That's good. And based on the process that we've been going through, it sounds like 37 that are qualified.
Yeah,
All right.
at least for that first pass, and I then had a question, I don't know if this comes up later, as to when that rubric will be ready to implement, because we're now at that point where we need to start narrowing the funnel a little bit, so just putting that out there as a thought.
Well, that might be any other comments about the rubric? Because that could segue into the timeline.
Okay.
Any, Mary
No,
Ann?
I don't have comments.
Kevin?
No, I was just going to say that, I'm working with the logistics team, which just sounds like we're moving stuff around, but it's also about trying to more finely tune the schedule.
Okay.
So that everyone isn't thinking that we're starting with the end in mind, which is at some point folks are going to be showing up, and then we're backing up from there to look at the kind of things that we need to do. We're looking at a community forum as well, and different modes of reaching out both before and after that forum. Get input from the citizens and feedback after the forum. So yes, I think I look forward to when the entire group gets back together, because we're off doing our own, the subcommittees are doing their own things now, and I
Right.
look forward to us coming back together very soon. So we're having, the logistics committee subcommittee is meeting tomorrow.
Okay.
And then we'll have more input. There's been a lot of activity over the weekend with question formulation and whatnot from the logistics team.
Great. Mary Ann?
So I have a question. When do we do the vetting thing? When will the rubric be ready?
So I think that's my segue into the timeline,
great.
and then I'll let you guys.
Okay, let's-
Okay, so first of all, I do want to say, 37 that, are viable candidates is a good number. 5 years ago when we did this process, we had 61, and, quantity-wise, that might sound great, but we really did not have a large pool of viable candidates. And we actually had more than 37. There have been a group of about a dozen that just didn't meet any of the qualifications for being a village manager. So we pulled those out of the pool. So having 37 that we can actually dig deeper into, I feel good about that. The way our timeline looks, and this was in the packet, is this is the week to start reviewing the applicants, and it sounds like we're on track with that. especially with the meeting on Friday, to look at this rubric and sort of do that like first pass. And then the plan is over the following 2 weeks to do that deep dive and really vet, which will require all of council to be involved. So council will be looking at all of those 37 applicants and getting it down to that, I guess, sort of not final 3 or 4 or 5, but that next group that we would want to be interviewing. And I would imagine most of those interviews would be by phone. We need to think a little bit more about the process for doing that, which it sounds like what Kanetta and Kevin are working on ties into that. And I want to make sure that we're, getting feedback from our citizen committee as well about that.
And just, so
Yes.
each of the committees agreed to have one person from each committee, in addition to the council people, to be the vetting.
Okay.
So, so when will the rubric be finished, and when will the council group and the vetters, when will we get those things to vet?
Yeah, so on this coming Friday, all of the people from the subcommittee this week, we're going through, we're adding in our notes. Everyone has the physical copy. When we get together on Friday, we will combine all of those, we'll review all of that, and then the rubric will be finalized from that committee that day, and it will then go to us, so,
Go to us being,
council.
so it has to come back to council? I mean, I'm just concerned about getting the work done.
Right, right. Well, we're not bringing the finalists here till April, so we've given ourselves the next 3 weeks to basically get to our short list. And
Okay.
so, so I think putting some dates on that makes sense. So, yeah, maybe we should talk about some specific sort of deadlines for those things to happen.
Because the council members have to rotate through to review individually because of the sunshine laws.
Well, we'll be able to, because I assume we've decided we're redacting, so we're taking names off, right, like we did before, right? So we had numbered them, thought we had talked about that. But if not, right, so.
Yeah, that just didn't come up at the meeting,
Oh.
whatever day that was,
Okay,
with Marianne and Kanetta and Judy, that
Okay.
we would do it that way, so that makes sense.
yeah, so, because we try to keep the names, I guess, out of the press until we get to that final group. And so, yeah, so they would be redacted names, or redacting the names, and then we would use the rubric. And so, essentially, we can all be doing the, assessments independently, but then we do need to meet to talk about those.
So you can just send them out like in a zip file to us, we can do it at home and.
Yes. So you're gonna have to decide who is in that group, that large end of the funnel, who all is in that group. So that I can start working on the whole redacting.
Well, we know.
Scanning and what you.
We have the names of the people.
Okay,
who
we
are-
do. So it's us 5, and then you said there's 3.
Jerry
additional-
Sutton is from our group.
We didn't pick one from the social media group because there were 2 people that weren't able to attend the meeting. And so we need to ask. And one question that came up is if more than one person wanted to review them all, would they be welcome to, or are we limiting it to one person? I was leaning on if they want to spend the time and give us that help, more data is better, but
I think we were limiting it.
Or are we limited?
That was my impression.
Right, so I guess we have to decide that.
For
And
the
then from
first round, anyway.
Yeah, from our group, it was Laura Curlis.
Okay. So your group needs to decide, Lisa.
So we only want one person. Okay.
And I'm certainly sensitive, Lisa, to the concerned about more than one person. So I'm wondering if, certainly to get that 37 down to that second tier number, 10 or so, then maybe everybody could weigh in on that. Yeah, because, the non-qualified people, I mean, those were easy to pull out. So I think maybe it will be more heavy lifting, but not the ultimate big push. If we can take that 37 down to that next number, I think it was,
Well,
Five
I think it'll, okay, what I thought we were going to do is, okay, let's say we have 37. We don't know how far down we'd go. I thought we were going to go down to maybe 10 to 15. And then, maybe then have the whole committee work on the 10 to 15 to get down to 3 to 5 or whatever.
Okay.
I think.
Well, that was my impression as well, and in part because you, council, had made such that it's an important point that you're reading for inclusion and looking at factors that might not have been weighed in the way that you wanted them weighed when you used a consultant. And to me, that means a more, just a careful vetting process. I think normally the push is, let's hurry up and get it down to the last 4. We have the tools at hand, we do that quickly. This is our final 4 bunch, and this is a much more careful scrutinizing of a larger group of people to be more inclusive.
Right. Because that was flagged as a potential issue last time, that we were not as involved with the larger group as we should have been, as we could have been.
With the larger group of.
Meaning the full, that, it was Lori Asklund, who I've quoted a couple times, who actually, we ended up going back and looking at all 61 again, just out of that concern that maybe we missed a gem.
Okay.
So, all right, well, that sounds good. I mean, that was part of, I think, that what was going to be figured out was how we were going to vet in terms of narrowing down the pool. So I like that process of having some support for the 37 to get us down to 10 to 15, having the full group evaluate so we have more input on those. And so, I think that means that we're looking at kind of like next week, we need to narrow it down by half-ish.
Yeah.
And then the following week, we have to have that discussion about getting to a final group. Keeping in mind that in conjunction with that is we also need to be doing the background checks to make sure that the finalists that we do bring back, are definitely, folks that could handle the job.
Well, and do you want to, or this can come further down the road, but probably not a bad idea, perhaps, to identify whether you have 2 dedicated folks who are contacting all references, for how just to look at how that will be done and how many people are doing that, because consistency of speaking with references is useful, but that's a whole heck of a lot of references, depending on when you start narrowing that funnel. And then that's that hasn't been determined yet, so.
Okay.
No. Sorry, Kevin was just asking if that's something that the social media group would be doing, but I think it's broader than that. I think what you're talking about is more, it's not about just social media exploration.
No, calling references, literally speaking with references over the phone, then I know Kenetta was interested in creating another rubric for evaluating those reference conversations, so.
Okay, so, I think, what that means, so who's involved in the committee that would be potentially contacting those references?
Well, I actually thought it might be back to council folks. That's.
Okay.
That requires a pretty high level of interviewing skill and job awareness, and usually they've got great questions they need to ask about the position and council role with the
Okay, well,
position, I think.
I want to be part of doing
Is
that.
that, are we talking about once we get the 10 to 15?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would think that there may be people on our committees who would also be competent, in fact, more than I competent, to do that. I think,
Should we maybe say it should be, Brian's identified himself as the council person most interested in that we select 2 other people in some fashion to be determined by you folks, so that you've got a group of 3 who are conducting those?
Yeah, I think I can pull that group together. Are there any other council members that want to be involved in that?
I will.
I'd like to do it.
Okay. So, all right, so we'll start with Brian, Lisa, Kevin, and then I will, I'll think about some of our citizen committee members that could support that part.
I'm a big fan of consistency in interviewing,
Yes.
you know, because otherwise you just get into this apple and oranges thing. So it's really important in HR processes to be certain to ask everybody the same thing. So I think in addition to the interview guides, we probably should have a reference checklist question set.
Okay. Okay, so what else do we want to pin down today?
Well, do you want me to bug you about the referenced question checklist and maybe have you start throwing back questions you'd like to see there and start putting something together?
Yeah, I think that sounds good. And, you know, we've got another council meeting on March 4th. So, so I guess on March 4th, we should have nailed down what this process is for going from 10 to 15 to the finalists. All right, so I think that would be the task in my mind, is working with those subcommittees to get everything nailed down. All right, and so as long as over the next 2 weeks, we're going through that narrowing process, it seems like we've got that under control.
I would recommend that we tie in with the Village of Yellow Springs HR policies whenever possible. So I would imagine this isn't the first time that we've ever done reference check calls. So perhaps it would be appropriate to honor Ruth Ann's expertise and ask her about some existing policies and processes, because there are some things, as we all know, you cannot ask.
She's actually ready when you are to give you folks a little tutorial on what you can and can't ask, kind of at your convenience. She's
Right.
here. And
Because that came up when Kevin and I were involved with the finance manager interviews. So, so she does have all that information
Yep,
ready.
she's ready. She's
We're
ready.
ready.
Okay,
Yep.
all right.
Okay. So, anything else on village manager search? Okay, great. Okay, so last piece of old business is talking about the SBA cell tower proposal. And so, yes, Johnny, you're gonna lead this one off? Okay. I heard that's what you were staying for.
Patty recommended that we go ahead and sell the cell tower location, as far as, we would not be selling the land, but, and I know Kevin's done some research, and so is the SpringsNet, and we're just looking for directions on where we want to go, if we want to counteroffer, if we want to do whatever you guys would like us to do. I don't think, Patty had mentioned something about if there's a lease or there's a lawsuit against the cell tower, it's only to the cell tower, it's not to the property itself. We still own the property. They would just be selling out the lease. The small 5G, I read a little bit in the package. 5G is going in throughout the village if they want to in the right-of-ways. We won't be seeing any of that other than the $275 for the application, $275 for the electric cost. Other than that, there's no releases. If it's public right-of-way, they can put it wherever they want to put it. And these are the areas that are hot right now. As far as 5G coming to the village, we as staff, council, representatives, we've done everything we can to slow it down, but the state is saying it's coming and you're going to make room for it. So we actually have one standing right now. It's not up in operation. It's over by the Wellness Center. It's on a wood pole. They own the pole. We're just supplying electric to it. And they've ran fiber all the way back to the Verizon tower right here. So, but I know that it's not up and running yet. So the recommendation that Patty was saying was is to go ahead and let them buy out their lease at the cost that they proposed. And I think that's what we're needing correct, or direction on which way you want to go.
Okay. Did want to field questions from here or the floor?
Yeah, well, I guess first of all, do council members have any questions or comments?
Well, I would just say this. I just think, that's, in all fairness, I'd like for the village to be in the best position possible. If they want to buy out the contract, I would just like for us to really look at the numbers and see how motivated they are. So here's a question I have, Johnny, that I never got answered, I don't think. So SBA came to the village 2 years ago?
I do remember 2 years ago, they come to the village, but at that time, the financial director wasn't interested in it.
Mhm.
I don't know that they ever threw a number out.
Okay, so that's what I was wondering, what the number was.
Yeah, I don't think they ever did. They wasn't looking for it.
Mm-hmm, okay.
So, and I do know that since I've been here, about yearly, they've taken a spot out of there. There's only one in there now that's on that tower, and they have already notified us that they would be coming off of that, so that tower would be sitting empty. They'll bring a crane in, they'll pick up the pod unit, and then there would be nobody on the tower probably by June.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's T-Mobile that's on there now.
Okay. So again, I just, wanted us to consider whether, just like buying a house or selling a house, if you take the first offer, the information that I shared was not meant to be, a professional opinion or inclusive, or exhaustive rather, and yes, and I know there were some comments back and forth about, well, that came from a consultant that does that kind of work. Well, yeah, but not just, I looked at more than just one consulting company, and there's a cottage industry of consultants that helps landowners get better prices if they're going to sell the rights to their tower, or if a lease is about to be bought out. And their goal is to get you more money. The fact of the matter is, there's an industry that exists for that, so there's the expectation, I believe, that the first offer that comes from a lessee or lessor, like SBA, is not going to be their best offer. They could absorb more.
So what do you propose?
Well, if I were going to propose something, I would say that we put together a counter proposal.
Okay.
So my question is, why would we put together a counter proposal rather than ask for a counter proposal?
There's no reason. If we're in agreement that there's more money to be had, whether you ask them to give us a better number or we propose a better number. Either way, I think it's talking to them saying, yeah, you can do better. And I think they can do better.
How would we make a determination of how much better they could do, or?
Well, an item is worth what you can get for it.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if we ask them to do better and they say, okay, 300,000, well, maybe they could actually do 500, how would we know?
Well, if I were going to pick a number, again, based on averages, I mean, there's companies who spent millions buying up these leases, and the simple math suggests that they're paying between 400, on average, between $470,000 and $530,000, which is at least twice what their initial offer is to us. So whether that involves us engaging, with a consultant to do that, or we just take information based on what consultants have done for other landowners and say, well, we want for our tower what other folks in the country have gotten for their towers, which again is.
Do we know what percentage these consultants take?
I do not.
Okay. Scott, are you here to comment on this, or?
I am.
Come on up.
It's fine. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank council for delaying this decision and giving us an opportunity to present you with some information. We appreciate that. Appreciate council's interest in it. If I may, just very briefly, by way of an introduction, I would remind you that it was 3 years ago exactly this month that SpringsNet first made a proposal to council about our municipal fiber to the premises network. I realize that only 2 of the current members of council were sitting at that time, and I would beg your indulgence for just a second while I just background a couple of points. We presented at that time a rationale for why we thought a municipally owned fiber to the premises network would be a very forward-thinking solution and a good progressive thing for the village to do. We still hold that opinion, of course. We also presented a white paper and a financial pro forma that we believe demonstrated the feasibility of the project, the cost effectiveness, and we presented the results of a survey indicating widespread community support and interest. After becoming a managers committee, as a result of that meeting, we hired a consultant. We had a second survey conducted. We got a tremendously high return rate from that survey, in the words of the consultant, and the results were almost exactly the same. A huge interest on the part of the members of the village community, and a lot of support for the idea of doing it. There were some concerns that we believe resulted in the reluctance to do that on the part of the village. These included the status of the existing poles and the expense of replacing poles, and concern about whether the poles could hold the additional weight of fiber, tree trimming, which was another expense, the general affordability problem, and some risk aversion, I believe, on the part of many in the community. And it was also raised the question of the ability to the village to manage yet another utility. We have no concerns about those ourselves, but those were nevertheless voiced and seen as viable concerns. And so now we have 5G. And I want to submit to you all tonight that 5G is a huge topic that is tremendously important for us to, in some way, wrap our arms around as a village. First of all, I want to stress that 5G is not a substitute for what we've been proposing all along. I would urge you not to think of them as this or that. That's not what it is. The cell tower buyout offer brings this topic forward again. I think it's timely, although I am aware that Village has got the council has a lot of weighty issues before it, as we've heard tonight. In the 3 years since we first proposed this idea, we of course have a new administration at the federal level. That means that we have a new Federal Communications Commission, and that is, in our opinion, bad, in a word. It has not been friendly to the kind of effort we're talking about. I want to stress to you that 5G is a standard. It's not a recipe or a prescription or a formula of how you do high-speed communication. It simply is a standard, much like the standard for organic food or, various other kinds of things. It says to be 5G, you have to go this fast, you have to hold this much traffic, you have to be able to do it in this much time. It is a multiple of tens to hundreds of times increase in all of those standard points. It's very important. There are many misconceptions about 5G, And we think it's very important for the village to have good advice, not only in this decision, but in many other decisions that will be coming at you quickly. Perhaps it's time to revisit the fiber to the premises program in some form or another. Saul mentioned several points tonight that I think exactly overlap with the goals that we have. The reality is that many of the new regulations from the FCC, as Johnny just referred to, are going to leave the village with no choice. If Verizon wants to come in and put fiber on your poles, just as we proposed, you won't be able to stop them from doing it. And the fact that trees aren't trimmed, you'll have to trim them. And you won't be able to make any revenue off of this because they've limited the amount of pole charges that you can make, and it's limited to your cost to do it. So as a revenue source, 5G is not there for us unless we happen to own a fiber optic network that was already on those poles, in which case I believe Verizon, Sprint, AT&T, and T-Mobile would all be talking to you about leasing that fiber from you and paying you a nice monthly fee for the use of it.
So Scott, what does this have to do with the cell tower?
What it has to do with the cell tower is, I would, again, as our letter pointed out to you, I would ask you to seriously consider why they would be offering you $280,000 for a tower that is believed to have no value or very little value.
But I guess what I'm asking is, I mean, you're distinguishing the fiber project, which, you know,
I
we
am.
do want to talk about, but.
Of course.
But I feel like you're conflating these two things.
Okay. I'm
How does
sorry.
the fiber relate to our decision on the cell tower?
There's a perception, I believe, that 5G is all about these small cells that
Right.
will go on towers, and they will. We don't know, I don't believe anybody knows exactly how many small cells will be required to bring 5G service throughout the village. But I think it's going to be on the order of many dozens, if not hundreds. All of those small cells will have to aggregate the data. The vastly increased amount of data has to get aggregated, and it has to get to the rest of the internet. That doesn't happen by magic. It happens in one of two ways. There are either fiber optic cables that carry that data to a place such as Mavecca or some other data center, or there is what's called a macro cell or a supercell, which could be a tower. If 5G is determined, I believe, based on readings that we've done, that currently AT&T, Sprint, and Verizon intend to use primarily fiber as their backhaul mechanism for 5G. T-Mobile is currently the one company that has, at least according to the trade magazines, expressed interest in trying to do it mostly with wireless communications, and that means towers. And it means towers with a lot other different kinds of equipment than what's on there currently. And we don't know exactly what that equipment is even going to be. We don't know how high the tower will have to be to support it. We don't know how many other companies might want to put equipment on a tower, or whether a company that built a tower and installed equipment might be able to share it between different carriers. All this stuff is just not known because of the nature of 5G. And again, I would suggest that they're not offering you $280,000 for it because they think it's worthless.
But you have followed the whole thing about in the agreement that we can still attach onto the tower or whatever we want.
I have, and that's a good thing.
Right.
And that would be very helpful to us, but
So, I
I
mean,
wanna
is
be
the main
perfectly
issue,
clear.
is the main issue that you're bringing forward, because again, I don't want to conflate all these things, it's not helping us make a decision, I don't think.
Correct.
Is the main issue just that there's a sense that they have something brewing, and so we should be going for a higher amount if we're going to make this deal? Is that the bottom line, or is there something else I'm missing?
Thank you for holding me to the fire on this, because I want to be perfectly clear. None of us in SpringsNet pretend to be experts on 5G technology. I'm not sure there's anyone that is a single expert on 5G technology. We do, however, know people who know people, and we believe we could provide you with some connections to people who are. Tim Barhorst and I talked with a couple of different people who seem to know more about it than we do, and their main advice was be careful. Just be very careful. Amp up your due diligence and look very carefully at who you're dealing with and that kind of thing. So our message to you is not that we want to come down on one side or the other of the issue or tell you how to do it. But we do think it's worth a warning to be very careful, and that you're going to have other decisions that will be coming at you very quickly. So some sort of pipeline or conduit to some real expert advice here, we think is very helpful, and we would be happy to assist you however we might be able to do that. And I'm sorry if I've taken a lot of your time to
That's okay.
not give you a clear
It's
answer,
interesting.
but
Thank you.
Yeah.
I hope that makes some sense. If there are any questions that you have of me regarding the letter or the documentation that we provided, I'm happy to address those, but
Well, I mean, we have to make a decision. And I don't think, as a council person, I don't want to tell Johnny, okay, Johnny, you go out there and spend 20 hours to figure out. I mean, so if your group is willing to do something, then I'd like to know, seems like maybe it makes sense to do that, whatever it is.
well, we're not wanting to tell Johnny what to do either. We would like to offer our services in whatever form we can to be helpful to you as decision makers in this process.
Right. And I think the best thing, Scott, that you all have offered us is the warning to stop and take our time. And I will acknowledge, that when I first mentioned this 2 weeks ago, I probably didn't speak as clearly as I should have, and I may have offended some village staff members by suggesting that we did not trust the work that they do. That is not the case. My point was that I don't trust SBA. And to your point, Scott, yeah, they're not going to spend that money if they're going to throw the tower away effectively. I think my position is, when I was asked by my colleagues here, well, what do I propose? My point is there is more money to be gained from this transaction. Either we sell it for more or we up our annual rents. So there's more money. It is worth more money to SBA, the tower is. It is worth more to them than $280,000.
I've read several trade magazine stories about the big three tower companies, which includes SBA as well as American Tower and another company whose name slips my mind at the moment. But there are plenty of stories of them buying entire lots of towers in the last 2 years and turning around and selling packages of them for 2 to 4 times what they paid for them. I mean, instant turnaround. They'll buy it for X dollars today, and they'll sell it for 2X or 3X or
Flipping
4X
towers, huh?
dollars tomorrow. Yeah, exactly. So I'm sorry if I'm not being more helpful to council, but we think this is a potentially fraught with all kinds of worries, and we would like to offer our help, and B, encourage you to
Right.
to
And
be
I just want to
cautious.
say, I don't want to imply that it's not helpful. I just, again, I want to make sure we separate the fiber thing, which, I appreciate that you want to, keep on making the pitch for that. And it's still on our radar.
And they are very distinct, but there is a certain amount of overlap, especially when it comes to the revenue possibilities of 5G. I think does present a real revenue possibility for the village if it's approached right. It's not going to come from leasing tower space, or it's not going to come from renting pole space. It might come from tower leases, and if not, it certainly could come from your own fiber backbone that they were.
Right.
they
Okay.
were- they were-
Thanks,
for your
Scott.
time.
Johnny, can you come back up for a minute?
Sure.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, so I guess I have a couple questions based on this discussion for you. So one, what do you think about this idea of looking at having an agent negotiate this deal for us?
It's more money to be spent, and if we decide that we don't want to do it, it's money that we spent that we didn't budget for. I can fully respect your decision to want to go back and ask for more. I don't think we should give them a price. I think we should ask them for a better deal and see what they come back. They could tell us, you know, we're good and we got our lease, but I don't think we should hire a consultant to try to get a better deal, because if they don't get that better deal, we're out money that we brought to, for no reason. Money's tight.
Right.
We got projects that are to be done. One of the benefits of this project is there are things leaving that tower. We would just get all the money, majority of the money up front, and we'd be able to put it towards other projects that we're looking for funding now. That was the draw for this, and if you want us to go back and ask for more, we'll go back and ask for more.
Is there a concern about them walking away from the deal if we pressure them
I believe
for
so.
more money?
I believe so. But we still get the monthly lease, or the yearly lease. They can't walk away from the lease, but they can walk away from a one lump
How long is
deal.
the
and
lease for?
I believe it's, they've got rates all the way out to 2054.
Oh, okay, and it keeps rising.
It keeps rising.
So it's really a low-risk proposition for us to ask, if they want to buy out the lease. And I sort of chuckled when I saw the Springs Net information. It appears that they made up, there's a reason where 280 came from. It took them 18 years, that's effectively what they got from, or what we got from them over 18 years.
Right.
And if we have to make up a reason to do a counter proposal, what will we get if we kept where we are for the next 18 years? That's 430,000?
That's time value of money.
Right, so we need to do that calculation, so that's another thing that, if you could ask Colleen to
Yep.
do that calculation,
We
I'd
can.
like to have that number. And then, I guess my other question is, how much discussion has there been? Has it mostly, has it been, they made an offer, you guys kind of looked at it, and then?
There's been some discussion, but then it mainly went to the lawyers for what they wanted, what we wanted, as far as the language in there.
Right.
So as far as money, I don't know that there's been any counter offers
Right.
for money.
Okay.
So,
Okay,
which is what we can do.
yeah.
Okay, so where are we? You're gonna,
All right, so we're gonna ask Colleen to do the
Okay.
time value of money.
For 18.
Right,
And Colleen was involved with this, and that's where she said if we took the buyout now, it would take us, I think, 16 years just on the lease and to get the return on the money.
right.
That
But you
they
didn't
wanna-
factor in like I think that was just a
That
straight.
was just straight tower
Right,
lease.
yeah.
Because right now, after T-Mobile gets off there, there's no more vendors on there.
Because, yeah, my rough guess would be that 280,000 today is 400 plus in 18, I don't know, I don't really have any reason to base that on anything,
Okay.
but I would imagine that we're talking about a significant amount, 18 years later.
Okay.
And if we're gonna, Scott and his group did this math, and I'd like, let Colleen follow up. Scott, I don't know if you have the numbers in front of you, but what was gained in the last 18 years, according to the graph that y'all put together, we crossed that threshold in 11 and a half years out. Is that not right?
It's in the packet.
It's in the packet.
Yeah, because it's that third 18 years is 600 and something or whatever, so there's a balance here. Okay, so I think, we should be ready to make a decision at the March 4th meeting.
Okay.
So, I guess, so related to that, Scott, if there are some people that we should be talking to about 5G, irregardless of this particular deal, I agree with you, we need to be proactive, in a broader sense about what's going on. Okay, so let's do that. Does that sound okay with
Okay.
council?
Right.
All right,
Thank
thank
you,
you,
John.
Johnny. All right, and Johnny, I think you're good. Were there any questions or comments about the cell tower before we move into new business? Okay, so I will try to be succinct, but I said that and I talked to Patty about this too, that I would go through the three, I guess I will say, letters of complaint that we got, and make some initial responses, even though it doesn't seem, well, I guess Jim's here, so, and so is Megan. So I guess the first one I'm going to talk about is the complaint about the evaluations. All right, so there are a couple things that I want to highlight here. So we have been saying for a while that the village can do a better job with our evaluations. And so, we accept that as an issue. I do want to highlight that 2 years ago, when the 365 group asked how they could help, the main thing I flagged was we would love support with working on evaluations, but we haven't gotten any community group support with that. So we have worked on it internally. I know that Patty, Ruth Ann, council, the chief have been working on it. And I will say that this has been an ongoing sort of gap. It is true that the policy manual does say that there should be an annual formal evaluation. It doesn't specify what format that takes. It doesn't say that it's in writing. And I don't get the impression that evaluations aren't happening, but I do agree that, and Patty does as well, she said I could speak for her, that we should do better, we can do better, and we will do better. One of the things I want to put out there, and I guess I'm going to be seeing you guys at the meeting at 9 o'clock tomorrow, is what council took the lead on, in particular with Corkle, which I will remind everyone is our 6 sort of village, I guess, values, attitudes, traits, which stands for collaborative, open, results-oriented, constructive, locally minded, and empathetic. So one of the things that I want to see in all our evaluations across the organization, and I'll talk about this at 9 o'clock tomorrow, is Corkle being a part of that. And we can have a discussion about what that looks like. I think that's one of the ways we can be more consistent. My understanding is also that everyone's evaluations since the fall are on calendars. Is that right, Chief? All right, so we know when those are supposed to happen. And so, and council also needs to get better about being timely about our evaluations of the village manager and the clerk. So, so I guess I will say, I take exception to some of the extreme language in this complaint letter and suggesting that this is the only reason that there would be performance problems, since these are specifically related to the Meister situation. But, again, I, as council president and representing what our village manager would be saying, do agree that we can do a better job with performance appraisals, and we have been working on this. This is also why we specifically appointed Ruth Ann to have the role, the HR role. All right. I think those are my main comments on that.
Maybe
Yes.
one thing, though. My understanding is that, at least in terms of the police department, these kind of, this has been a historical issue.
Yes.
It didn't just happen when Chief Carlson came in. It has been decades that these kind of formal procedures have not been in place.
Yeah, I think that's, that is actually in my notes, and I think that's a great point to
Through
add.
various police chiefs and through various officers who've come and gone and who've done great jobs and who have done less great jobs.
And through various village managers as well.
Yes,
Right.
and councils,
So-
and people who live here.
Exactly,
et
right.
cetera,
So it
et
has
cetera.
been an ongoing issue, I agree, and that was flagged, in fact, by when, it was pointed out that we don't see this sheet in everyone's file every year on year, all right? So this has been an ongoing problem. I guess, since Mary Ann mentioned that, I also want to appreciate that there are a lot of things going on at at-the-Village and in the police department, a lot of things that our new chief got thrown into, and, all of these improvements take time. But that all being said, we can do better, we will do better, and we've been working on it actively. All right, so I want to talk about next the complaint related to the taser use. And I'm assuming that it's not intentional that words keep on being left out of policies, all right? But in the policy about tasers, it says that tasers should not be used solely to gain compliance, all right? That's left out of the complaint letter. And then the policy goes on to say, we use tasers when the person's being violent, physically resisting, immediate threat of injury to themselves or others. So there's a lot to the taser policy, and we did a lot of work on that taser policy to make sure that we avoided situations. So the main complaint here seems to be that there was this internal investigation, and why wasn't this treated in other ways? But this was not an investigation. This was a use of force review. Okay, these are very different things. When any officer uses force, it is reviewed, and it's Sergeant Knapp that reviews the use of force?
Unless it's his use of force,
Then it would be you. Okay. So that is the common process. That's how we do it every time. And in this case, if you look at the facts of the situation and the email that Chief Carlson sent, we will make sure is in the next packet with all those details. But specifically, I will highlight some details. 4 officers tried to calm the individual down. Okay, and I realize that he had a mental illness, but that does not mean that he was not being violent and threatening. He threatened that he was going to kill the officers and kill the Friends Care staff. The taser was put in stun mode, and actually the reason it was fired twice is because it did not make contact because he had very heavy clothes on because of the weather. So I believe that the use of force review was done appropriately. All those facts are in writing, and we can get that email to Megan. The folks that complained about this, I guess we maybe could forward that to them, and we could get this in the next packet.
Is it correct that he did not attack any officer?
Correct.
But he was struggling, right?
Yeah, threatening, struggling, and then attempting to come back to town.
Oh, I misunderstood you when you said earlier that he had done something to you.
Oh, the reason he wasn't charged for assault on an officer, I believe it was inadvertent.
I think you should come to the
Yeah, maybe you
microphone,
should come to the
please,
mic for
Chief
this one.
Carlson.
Typically, when an officer is assaulted, there would be a charge. But I believed, even though I was the one that suffered the blow, that it was inadvertent in his struggling. So therefore, we didn't charge him with that.
Okay. Any other questions about that one? Okay. All right, thanks, Chief. Yeah, I guess you could stay close by just in case something else comes up. Okay, so then the third letter was, I guess, specifically a complaint against Sergeant Knapp, and that he was sort of derelict in his duties. And it references New Year's Eve and also the current incident where Meister chose not to go with Officer Raful to clear the scene. So Officer Raful, again, remember, had to clear the scene on his own when we knew nothing more than that shots were fired. So the first thing about New Year's Eve, the decision that was made to put the officer in charge, who was subsequently dismissed after a lengthy and costly investigation, that was the decision of former Chief Hale. That was a main reason that I specifically asked Chief Hale to resign, which he did. So I do not agree that this was the fault of Sergeant Knapp. All right, he was not the person that chose to put that officer in charge. That was our former chief. Secondly, there are several allegations in this complaint that are not factually true. One of those has already been clarified in the investigation, which is that, and this is in the current incident, that Officer Meister did not ask the dispatcher whether, to call the supervisor. She has denied that. Officer Meister said he did and then said he didn't. So that is not a fact in this case. The other thing that we know is that Officer Meister left before Sergeant Knapp was called. And then there is this continued reference to the overtime policy as a reason that he did not back up the junior officer. My understanding is that no one in those kinds of situations asks for permission to have overtime. And what's this other thing that I wrote?
I guess I'm just going to step in here.
Please
because
do.
I think it's sort of ludicrous in a situation where there is potentially an active shooter 1 block away, that an officer would take the time to call up his or her supervisor to ask, is it okay if I go to a scene of active shooting and help a fellow officer? That is ludicrous, in my opinion.
Well stated. So I think part of the reason why, if you can sense a little frustration in my voice, is that, the problem I see with the theme of these 3 letters is that there's this continued trying to rationalize poor decision-making. And poor decision-making that has been highlighted in prior investigations, in a current investigation, and it is now what we're looking at in terms of the pre-disciplinary hearing. So, again, I understand there's a lot of emotion. I understand and agree that Dave Meister is a great guy, but that does not excuse, as Mary Ann kind of got to the point with, that in this particular situation, when, safety was on the line, a decision was made that regardless of how we cherry pick that policy, at the heart of it, it does say if people are at risk, an officer should step up and try to support it. So, anyway. So definitely some things that we can improve, but, I don't think that means that at least I am going to accept making, rationalizing every little detail and not looking at the overall picture of what's going on. Okay. So, Bob,
As a citizen,
you can come to the mic.
I don't understand some of these comments. The situation was cleared. Livingston was dead.
It
The gun
wasn't
was
cleared,
under
Bob.
control.
No, Bob.
It wasn't cleared.
No, Bob.
Everything I've read said
Well,
it was. Am I
the-
reading the wrong thing?
Bob.
The Dayton papers had it, the Springfield papers had it, your papers had it.
Well,
Am I reading the wrong articles?
yes,
Okay,
apparently
all
you're
right.
reading the wrong information, or the information is wrong, yes.
Okay, the comment, though, that I can understand myself, you had this officer hamstring after you busted him down to patrolman. You said, one more misstep, and you are history. That's exactly what you told him. Maybe you said it in different words, but it was clear to Meister, hey, I got to be circumspect, I can't violate anything, and I think that is the big problem here.
Well,
You
that is
hamstrung
not-
his activity. You really did. The first time you
First of
busted
all,
him down.
I didn't do anything, and none of us
I didn't say you
anything.
did.
Yeah,
But
you're
whoever
saying-
wrote the
you're
manual,
saying.
whoever gave the discipline out the first time, made it clear to Meister, another misstep, and you are history.
Is that?
Yes, it
No.
was.
Bob, one of the problems, I think, is that we now have a number of people in the community, one, who have information that's partially true, partially untrue, and they're taking this information and apparently feeling like they have that they know how a police department should be run, and that they understand the policies, and they pull out things, and it's misread, there's misinformation. There's, I believe, an intentional effort by a couple people to, I don't know what the word, I'll say a vendetta against our police department, and some of the information that's coming out is coming from, I believe, people who are trying to attack our police chief, trying to attack various officers in our department, and it is creating an untenable situation. We cannot have 3,700 people looking, well, and a number of them are requesting documents. I have no idea how much time the police department and Judy Kintner is having to spend pulling out documents that people read, or look at part of a video and think, well, I know how this should have happened. None of us here are experts on what should be happening in a police department. And we cannot have decisions about our police being made by every single person in the
I agree
village.
100%. What
Good.
you said is I've been around town a long time.
I
I
know.
found out the older people come to me, and they tell me one thing, and I come down to the village office to people I trust, and they say, Bob, that's not the case at all. It almost depends on where you are in the age spectrum. But still, there is an awful lot of people that are interested in this town. This town has a lot of interesting people. They too believe in fairness, and I think the overall view is fairness has not totally been followed in this situation. All I can tell council is just review everything, take slow steps, because what you say is true. And you're getting a lot of unfair criticism. But I think some of this criticism is on the mark. So you've got to be Job reincarnated to make the decision. But you have to move slowly, and I think every citizen does have a chance, as long as it's done in a modular tone, it's not in a threatening tone, as long as they have some basis for what they say. And in this town, it's hard to get basis sometimes. And if you think you have basis, when it goes around the block, it is not the story that you thought you had. So Yellow Springs has been this way a long time.
Right.
So be circumspect, be slow, follow your gut sometimes. But I've been around longer than any of you people. And I've done my homework. I've been part of the community. And I personally feel that Meister is part of a vendetta, that some of it is probably of his own making on a couple of decisions he made earlier about someone riding on a motorcycle with Chief Pettiford. I think that is part of this. I think the other part is, I think the police department is somewhat uncomfortable with adulation that comes toward Meister. But Meister's the only one people know. I know we've got people on the police force that could out-Meister as far as the community policing concept. But who the hell knows? We don't know who they are, so that's another problem.
And
So
that's-
I'll end
that's
up, you
what-
know my stand on Meister. I think he epitomizes what we want in the community policing, and I acknowledge, if he had to do it again, maybe he would change something. I was thinking about this last night at 4 o'clock. I heard a story that Meister stopped somebody, I don't know, was it a taillight, or you got to understand, when you're in the cruiser, you know exactly what's going on in front of you. You know whose car it is, you know the arrest record of the owner, you know a lot of things that you would never know a decade ago. But anyway, if you do stop somebody and you do smell alcohol, and you do know it's a teenager, you've been stopped once before, someone's got to make a decision on, is he going to lose his license, is he going to lose his job, so forth. And that's a tough decision, because maybe a citation is to serve a wake-up call for this driver and say, hey, you cannot continue doing this. He may not have been weaving, he may not have been driving recklessly or speeding, but if he had alcohol in his breath, and I know nothing what I'm talking, I don't know anything, but I'm just taking a imaginary stop. If he does have alcohol in his breath, maybe that kid, and I'm guessing he's young, needs a wake-up call, some kind of treatment, some kind of counseling, and without a citation, he didn't get it. So, you know, it's just one of those tough decisions that have to be made. But you know my position.
Right.
Okay.
I think you all have a tough position, and I expect that you'll do it with the best fidelity that's possible. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Bob. And I think many of those comments are fair. I just want to say, you know, the overall issue here is these things are being investigated. There are facts that are being misrepresented. There is misinformation. People are being unfairly maligned. And all of our officers, and we don't hear all these stories, but all of our officers practice that leniency that you're talking about. But there are still policies to follow.
Right, I understand.
So, but I appreciate your comments.
Okay, all right.
Thanks. Okay. Jim, did you want to say something?
Quick word, yeah. The problem the village is in at this moment is, let's say Meister did the other thing that he went on.
Right. It would have made this decision a lot easier.
Well, no, I don't think it would have. I think it would have come out the same way. And that's the problem that the village has, is that villagers believe the decision about Meister has nothing to do with his action.
Yes, and there are people who are promoting that, people who are intentionally promoting that viewpoint. And those people do not work for the village. They may be associated with people who work for the village, but they don't work for the village. And there's not a lot that we on council can do about someone who is intentionally putting out misinformation, intentionally putting out information that should be not even being put out. Confidential information that should stay within the police department, intentionally putting it out so that it makes certain things appear negative toward other officers and positive towards one officer. And we cannot do anything about that because those people do not work for the village.
I understand that. What I see is Andrew McCabe. He had tons and tons of hearings and investigations, but everybody knew how it was going to come out.
I'm sorry, I don't know who that is.
He used to be the assistant director of the FBI. Trump just got
Oh,
rid
I'm
of him.
sorry. I was in another world.
So,
I'm like, this
whether it
person
is-
that lived in the village?
Whether it is true or not, the stream has been so polluted that I don't know how you ever come to a situation that is acceptable. I mean, every step of the way, as I said before, was predictable. We knew how it was going to come out.
Really?
Yes.
Well,
Because the belief is that it has nothing to do with his
yes,
actions.
I'm aware of that belief, and I'm saying that that information, that narrative, as is spoken, is intentionally being put out there Just like Trump intentionally puts out that there are terrorists coming in through the border. And he thinks if he puts that out enough, people will believe it. Well, we have some of that happening in Yellow Springs.
I understand that.
And I agree, it's a problem
But
because people believe it.
Somehow, the citizens have to be convinced that this is an actual procedure, that it's not a fake procedure.
Yes, and it's difficult.
And
When
that
people have
stream
one
is-
belief, it's very hard to change that.
Well, I'm saying that the stream is polluted, and I don't know how you unpollute it.
Yep.
And I don't know how it ever ends.
We don't know.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, so I'm sure we will continue to talk about this topic. Chief, did you want to add anything, or?
I'm okay unless you guys have any questions.
I think we're good. Okay, so I think Patty's manager report speaks for itself, unless anyone has any questions. We do not have a clerk report, so are there any things that you guys want to highlight about boards and commissions?
Yes, I want to nominate Sue
Oh, yes.
Pfeiffer for the Environmental Commission. Kanetta and I met with her. She has a background in some engineering-related fields, but I think more importantly, she is passionate about recycling.
Yes,
And
and
she has-
recycling those plastics.
Yes, and she has been doing a lot of work in figuring out how we can do a better job in Yellow Springs. She came to our EC retreat on Saturday, and so I am nominating her for a position on the Environmental Commission.
Great. I'll second, can I have a second? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Anything else related to boards and commissions? Okay, so I know we talked about some future agenda items at the beginning of the meeting. Is there any other agenda planning business? So we know we're gonna have a tight ship on the village manager search. I will take the lead on that, all right? And we'll have those dates in stone-ish on March 4th. Anything else?
Did you want the resolution for the lease to come back? I wasn't clear on that. You were like, we're making a
I
decision.
think we
but-
have to make a decision and then,
Okay, so.
I mean, we've
discussion.
we've seen what, we know what it's gonna look like if we pass it. So, yeah, I'm not, I mean, what do you guys think? Would we be ready for a resolution?
No.
Probably not, right?
So discussion?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Anything else?
Well, the things that we talked about, Judy, should you just put them on a parking lot kind of thing? For the dark
Well, I
skies.
know,
hitch-
and Johnny was out of here, but I gave him a look and said, are you already aware of the hitching post request? And he said, oh, yeah. So that may be something we can just throw into the manager's report, because I think that's going on in Public Works.
Okay.
So that's one, I'll follow up. And then, do you want to just agenda planning, make some assignments for the other two?
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
we'll put dates,
Yeah.
Okay.
possible dates.
And the dark skies piece actually might be one that needs to go to planning commission, because that's where that happens.
I don't know.
Hmm.
It's just, I just don't want to lose it.
Mhm. What do you think? I mean,
Well, it's zoning code that says these are the kinds of lights you can have, and here's where they can be directed, and how much wattage you can have, and all those things come out of planning commission, so.
okay.
It's like a designation that you can get for dark skies. There's certain requirements.
So let's have it as a discussion and then we might direct planning commission.
So then, do
and
you
so
want to
on.
run point on it, gather the
I
info?
think we had a letter from Curlis.
We do, yeah.
So can we just resurrect that and get that in, and I'll try to get my head
So
around it?
let's put it for the first meeting in April
Yeah.
for now. Okay,
Yeah, because I want culture of health to have a little time.
okay.
Thank you.
All right, great. Anything else? All right, thanks, everyone. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. I'm gonna go study my political names right now. I was like, who are you talking about? How embarrassing.
60 Minutes last night, too.
Do not quote that, Megan.
If you could be forgiven in the
I know,
context
I
of the
just,
local
I,